"We're not funding this circus." That's all she said. Calm, final, like a judge delivering a sentence. In that single moment, my entire life, my wedding, my future collapsed with one sentence. My mother's voice didn't waver. My sister didn't even blink. "Better luck next time," she added, smirking like it was a joke. My dad stayed silent, just like he always did when Mom decided who I was allowed to be. I could have screamed. I could have begged. But instead, I said one word. Understood. And that was the last word I ever said in that house. They thought I'd break. They thought I'd crawl back like I always did. But 3 weeks later, when their perfect world began to crumble, they finally learned what that word really meant. From the outside, my family looked perfect brick house, polished smiles, Sunday dinners nobody dared to miss. But behind every laugh was a rule, and behind every "we love you" was control. My mother built a kingdom of order. My father just followed orders. And my sister? She was the crown jewel who could do no wrong. That day, I walked out with nothing but silence. But what they didn't know was that silence wasn't surrender. It was the sound of the storm that was coming for them. Because this story starts with one word, and ends with everything they tried to take from me. From the outside, we look like the kind of family people envied. Every Sunday, neighbors saw us at church in matching smiles and pressed clothes. Every Christmas card had perfect lighting, perfect poses, perfect lies. But perfection was just my mother's favorite illusion. Carol Perry didn't raise children, she raised trophies. Every word, every outfit, every friend we had was filtered through her approval. She controlled everything. How we spoke, how we dressed, even what dreams were considered respectable. My father Robert never argued. He didn't need to. He just stood behind her like an echo, nodding at whatever command she gave. He called it keeping the peace. I called it surrender. And then there was Shannon, my older sister, the golden one. She could fail a class, crash a car, lie straight to Mom's face, and still be met with forgiveness. "She's just passionate," Mom would say. Meanwhile, if I spoke so much out of turn, I'd get the cold look that could freeze air. When I was 12, I told Mom I wanted to be a fashion designer. I spent months sketching dresses, cutting fabric, and dreaming. One afternoon, she found my sketchbook. She flipped through the pages like she was handling evidence, then tossed it straight into the trash. "You're not wasting your life on fantasies," she said. I remember the sound of the paper crumpling. I remember my father standing beside her, silent as usual. That was the day I learned something dangerous. Silence could keep the peace. So I stayed quiet. Through every snide comment, every comparison to Shannon, every "this is what's best for you," I told myself it was easier that way. But silence has a way of building pressure, and the longer you hold it, the louder it explodes. And soon mine was going to. Years passed, and the silence paid off, or at least that's what I told myself. I became what my mother wanted: predictable, practical, respectable. I got my degree in accounting, a career with benefits, and no imagination required. Every decision I made came stamped with her invisible approval. Shannon, on the other hand, got to shine. She studied marketing, creative enough to sound impressive, but safe enough for Mom to brag about. When she opened her boutique, Carol threw her a party that looked like something out of a magazine. Champagne string lights, pearls glinting around her neck as she toasted "my daughter's vision." I remember standing in the corner, watching them beam at each other. Mom said, "You've always had flair." The word burned in my chest. Flair. I had that once too, before she crushed it under the weight of her expectations. Then everything shifted when I met Eric. It was at a community fundraiser, the kind of event my parents called small town nonsense. He worked for a nonprofit, mentoring kids who didn't have much. He laughed easily, listened when I spoke, and never once made me feel small. For the first time, I felt seen not as a project, not as a disappointment, but as a person. The first time I brought him home, Mom's smile froze halfway through dinner. "What do you do?" she asked. When he told her, her lips twitched into a polite, icy smile. "How admirable." Dad muttered something about kindness being important. Shannon just smirked. Ambition's optional, I guess. But Eric never flinched. He just reached for my hand under the table, calm and steady. For 3 years, he stayed through every snide comment, every cold silence. Together, we planned our wedding, simple, beautiful hours. The Ivy House wasn't extravagant, but it felt like magic. We saved every dollar ourselves. No strings. No control. When Mom offered to help, I wanted to believe it was love. I thought maybe she'd finally changed. I should have known better, because in my family, love always came with conditions. And her offer was just the first step of her next move. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. The dress was ready, the deposits paid, and every detail carefully planned. For once, I thought my mother might actually be proud of me. She'd even offered to help with the arrangements, saying she wanted the best for her daughter. When she called me back to the house one morning, I thought it was to discuss flowers or catering. But when I walked through that front door, I felt the tension immediately. The kind that sits in the air like a storm about to break. Mom stood by the fireplace, arms folded. Shannon was sprawled across the couch, scrolling through her phone like she owned the place. Dad stared at the rug, avoiding my eyes. Then came the words, "We're not funding the circus." Her tone was calm, final, cutting. "Better luck next time," Shannon said without looking up. The words hit harder than I expected. My throat tightened, my vision blurred, but I didn't let them see it. Instead, I straightened my back, nodded once, and said one word. "Understood." The room went still. Mom blinked, maybe surprised by how quickly I gave in. Shannon smirked, sure she'd won, but they didn't realize something had shifted. Silence wasn't my surrender anymore. It was my declaration of war. I walked out of that house for the last time, my heels echoing against the marble floor, each step louder than the last. The drive home felt endless. The sky was gray, the kind of gray that makes everything look smaller. My phone buzzed with calls from Eric, but I couldn't answer. I needed quite just the hum of the road, something steady to drown out the noise in my head. When I got home, I saw the wedding invitations on the counter with our names printed in gold. I stared at them for a long time before sweeping the whole stack into a box. I wasn't angry yet. I was numb, numbness that sat in my chest like a stone. That night, Eric came over, his eyes full of worry. "What happened?" "They canceled it," I said flatly. "They what?" "They called the venue, the florist, everything. It's all gone." He looked at me like he couldn't believe it. "Do you want me to go talk to them?" I shook my head. "No, this time it's my turn." When he left, I sat alone in the quiet apartment. I pulled open an old drawer, one I hadn't touched in years. At the bottom, I found it in my high school sketchbook. The one Mom threw away, but I'd secretly rescued. The pages were bent and smudged, filled with dresses and shoes and fragments of the person I used to be. I ran my fingers over the drawings, and for the first time in years, I felt it again, defiance. That night, I whispered the word to myself like a vow. Understood. It used to mean surrender, but not anymore. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. My mother had canceled everything. Too quickly, like she'd been waiting for that moment. So I started digging. I pulled up every receipt, every payment confirmation, every contract tied to the wedding. It all looked too neat, too deliberate. There was no way she'd managed to shut it all down overnight without help. That's when I called the Ivy House. The coordinator hesitated before answering. "I'm sorry, Miss Perry, but your mother already sent us your signed cancellation notice." "My what?" "It had your signature," she said softly. The room spun. I could barely hear her after that. My signature, forged, used to erase my own wedding. I hung up, staring at the phone in my hand until my reflection blurred. My family hadn't just canceled my plans, they'd stolen them. That afternoon, I drove to Diane Cole's office. She used to handle legal work for my company, sharp as glass and just as clear. When I told her what happened, she didn't gasp or pity me. She grabbed a pen and said, "Show me everything." I handed her the files, contracts, receipts, invoices. She flipped through them, her pen tapping rhythmically against the desk. Then she stopped. "This cancellation form," she said quietly, holding it up to the light. "That's not your handwriting." I leaned in. My name was there, scribbled across the bottom, but not in my hand. "Someone forged it," Diane said. "And if they used your financial information to make these payments, that's a crime." The word crime hit me like cold water. This wasn't just manipulation. It was theft, calculated, planned. We spent hours cross-checking every document, tracing payments and withdrawals. That's when we found money siphoned, directly from my account to Shannon Perry Designs. Thousands of dollars. Another trail led to my parents' credit card bills and a contractor for home renovations. Diane set the papers down and looked at me. "They used your money to cover their debts. This goes deeper than you think." That night, I sat in the dark, the glow of my laptop the only light in the room. Every memory replayed in my head, Mom's cold tone, Shannon's smirk, Dad's silence. And slowly, everything clicked into place. The wedding wasn't about love or control anymore. It was about hiding something. They hadn't just sabotaged my wedding. They'd covered up their own crime. And I was done being quiet about it. The next morning, my phone rang. The name flashing on the screen made my stomach drop. Uncle Stephen. We weren't close. He'd always stayed out of family drama. So if he was calling now, something was wrong. His voice was low, uneasy. "Eleanor, there's something you need to know," he said. "It's about your grandfather's trust fund." I froze. "What about it?" He hesitated. "Your grandfather set up a fund for you years ago, $250,000. It was supposed to be yours when you got married." For a second, I couldn't speak. "Mine?" "Yes, but your parents, they've been managing it and withdrawing from it for years." The words didn't make sense at first. It felt like he was describing someone else's life, not mine. "How do you know?" I finally asked. "I checked the records myself," he said. "Shannon's business expenses, their home renovations, even some debt payments, it all traces back to your trust. If you'd gotten married, the fund would have triggered a full audit. They had to stop it before that happened." My heart pounded so hard it hurt. "You're saying they canceled my wedding? To keep their theft hidden?" "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I thought you already knew." But I didn't, not until now. When the call ended, I sat there staring at nothing. My chest felt hollow, the kind of empty that burns. I thought about every time I'd bent to my mother's control, every understood I'd whispered to keep the peace. All of every sacrifice, every silence had just been fuel for her lies. They hadn't done this out of love. They'd done it to protect themselves. I opened my laptop and started typing a message to Diane. "We're filing the case." Then I whispered the words out loud, steady this time. They wanted control. Now they'll get consequences. At that moment, I wasn't the quiet daughter anymore. I wasn't the obedient one who bowed her head to keep the peace. I was the storm they never saw coming. 2 days later, I showed up at my parents' house. Same red brick walls, same trimmed hedges, same fake peace that used to keep me quiet. But this time, I wasn't walking in as their daughter, I was walking in as the woman they stole from. Mom opened the door, perfectly composed, as if nothing had happened. "Eleanor," she said, smiling tightly, "I didn't expect you to show up uninvited." "I bet you didn't," I said, stepping inside. Shannon was on the couch, scrolling through her phone like she owned the place. Dad was in his chair, eyes glued to the TV, pretending not to notice the tension flooding the room. Typical. I set the folder on the table bank statements, forged documents, and a copy of the trust fund records. "You forged my signature," I said flatly. "You drained my account. You used my wedding as a cover to steal from me." Mom's smile didn't falter, but her eyes did. Just for a split second. "That's a serious accusation," she said, voice steady but brittle. "It's not an accusation," I replied. "It's evidence." Shannon laughed, rolling her eyes. "You're seriously going to make this into a drama? You should thank Mom for saving you from marrying that guy. He wasn't even good enough for you." "Don't," I said sharply. "This has nothing to do with him. This is about you. All of you." Dad finally looked up, guilt flickering across his face. But he didn't say a word. He never did. Mom's tone turned cold. "You're overreacting, Eleanor. Everything we did was for your own good." "For my good?" I said, my voice trembling with fury. "You stole my money, forged my name, and ruined my future to protect yours." Silence, heavy and suffocating. Then I slid a document across the table, a formal notice from Diane's office. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer. I'm pressing charges." For the first time in my life, my mother's mask cracked. Her eyes widened, her voice breaking. "You wouldn't dare." I met her gaze. I already did. I turned and walked out, leaving the folder where it lay. Behind me, I heard Shannon curse under her breath, and Mom's voice rose in a panicked whisper. But I didn't look back. Outside, the air was cool, the sun bright against my face. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like I was suffocating. That day, the family that built their kingdom on lies finally saw what it looked like when their power collapsed. And I was finally free and didn't need their approval anymore. They taught me control. I learned resistance. They taught me silence. I found my voice. And this time, they couldn't take it back. The lawsuit hit them harder than I expected. Within weeks, word spread through our small town. The perfect Perry family pillars of the community. The ones who never missed. A Sunday service were suddenly the subject of whispers and headlines. Mom tried to keep up appearances, walking into the country club with that same frozen smile. But the glances were different now, pity mixed with judgment. People weren't buying her performance anymore. Shannon's business started losing clients fast. Turns out no one wanted to work with a designer accused of siphoning her own sister's trust fund. Her once bustling Instagram page turned into a battlefield of comments, half defending her, half exposing her lies. She started posting quotes about forgiveness and family unity, but everyone knew it was desperation disguised as grace. Dad, well, he finally spoke. A quiet apology came through a late-night voicemail I didn't return. He said he never knew how to stop Mom, that he thought keeping the peace meant keeping the family together. But by then, it was too late for regrets. Meanwhile, Diane and I pushed forward. The investigation revealed years of misused funds meant for me, funneled through shell accounts and business expenses. Every document became another nail in their illusion. And the best part? The trust fund wasn't gone, it was frozen, waiting for court approval to be released back to me. One afternoon, I sat across from Diane as she slid a new set of papers my way. "You're getting it back," she said. "All of it. Plus damage." For the first time in months, I exhaled. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about reclaiming everything they thought they owned. My voice, my choices, my life. Still, victory didn't feel like revenge. It felt quiet, peaceful. The kind of peace that comes after years of chaos. A week later, I got a letter from my mother. It wasn't an apology. It never would be. Just a few neat lines in her handwriting. "Family is forever, Eleanor. You'll regret this." I smiled, I folded it once, and tossed it into the fire. Some ties aren't meant to be mended. Some bloodlines are better left behind. Because sometimes the only way to rebuild your life is to burn down the one that tried to control it. Weeks passed before the dust settled. The phone rang less each day, first Mom, then Dad, then Shannon. Every voicemail sounded the same. Soft voices coated in guilt. Apologies that came too late. "We just want to talk, sweetheart." Things got out of hand, but Eleanor didn't answer. She had nothing left to give them. The people who once dictated every choice she made had finally lost the power to touch her life. She heard through Uncle Stephen that Dad had lost his job after a scandal. Mom was working part-time at a department store, her pearls traded for name tags. Shannon's boutique had closed, debt swallowing everything she'd stolen to keep afloat. The irony wasn't lost on her that the family that worshipped control had been undone by it. That night, as her phone buzzed again, Eleanor didn't hesitate. She typed one message and hit send. "The circus is already full." Then she set the phone down, poured herself a glass of wine, and opened her sketchbook under the soft kitchen light. The pages were filled with new designs, bold, alive, hers. Not for approval. Not for anyone else's validation. Just her own creation. Freedom, she realized, wasn't loud. It wasn't fireworks or revenge. It was these quiet mornings, honest laughter, and the weight of no one's expectations on her shoulders. Outside, the world moved on. Inside, she felt still, peaceful, whole. Her mother once called her wedding a circus. Maybe she was right. Because now the show was over and Eleanor was the one who walked away smiling.